Okay. Hi, everyone. My name, like you said, is Shannon Martin. I met Dr. Ingram back in the fall of 2019. I have learned a lot since that time frame. I was going to share a little bit of my story and then kick into the slides that I have prepared for you guys. If I look down, it's just because I tend to go off on a tangent, and so I do have some notes for me to kind of keep me on task here. But like she said, I'm a mold consultant, building biology advocate, and a real estate agent, and it all began. I actually started out as a health coach, but then in July of 2019, my son, who was 6 at the time, started having tics, motor tics with his neck and his mouth. And it was nonstop. It seemed like he was doing it every 30 to 60 seconds, literally just one day. And I knew something clearly was wrong because he had never done anything like that before. I reached out to his pediatrician. We ended up doing a strep test. He did test positive for strep. So then they sent us to a neurologist, and the neurologist wanted to check to see if he had pandas, which can be associated with mold and everything. And so that came back negative. And he was pretty nonchalant about it and just said, sometimes the boys just get ticks and he might outgrow it and he might not. And if it doesn't bother him, don't worry about it. If it does, here's some ADHD medicine prescription. And I knew that was not the answer, because at that time, as a health coach, I dove deep down into toxins all the time, and I knew there had to be something else. I had a suspicion about mold, but I really wasn't sure. But I knew that I needed to seek out a functional medicine doctor, and that's how I came upon meeting Dr. Ingram. And wouldn't you know, like, one of the first questions that she asked me was, have you had water damage in your house? And I had. We had some roof leaks. We had a faulty bathroom vent that was kind of raising suspicions for me, but I really wasn't clued into the fact that humidity that was created at that time in the bathroom would be causing mold. So that's kind of how I met Dr. Ingram. That's how my story began. It got me to where I am today. We, just for signs, and I know like a lot of you guys are already working with Dr. Ingram, but certain things that had happened prior to the ticks that I didn't know at the time were early signs of mold was that my son was always clearing his throat. He was stretching his arms, complained about his fingers and his elbows hurting. So he was having joint pain. Mind you, he was like 6 at the time. He was having chronic belly aches. It took him hours to fall asleep, even though we had a calm nighttime routine. So these were little clues that were easily dismissed as something else it wasn't until we had the huge red obvious flag of the ticks that we're like, okay, wait, something is wrong. So I think that's kind of important for some people that maybe don't realize that they might have something more of a deeper issue with mold, is with all these little, I like to call them like little whispers of something going on that are easily dismissed as something else. So there's that. And then also too, like other people in the house were having some issues. Like I was waking up with headaches quite often, almost daily. I was starting to have some memory issues where I could literally not read a recipe and then have to go back and reread the exact ingredient that I just read. I literally could not remember it. So those are also little clues that maybe some of you guys have experienced or are. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into the slides because I feel like I might get too far off. And so that way we can get into why I became a realtor and a building biology advocate was actually mainly because I didn't want people to have to go through what we did. If you can just notice the signs in your house early on, because quite often mold is not like what you expect it to be, the way they have it in the photos. You think that you only have a mold problem if you can see it, but all too often you can't smell it, or you can't actually see the physical mold because it's hiding, underneath the subfloor, it's in the wall, or it's underneath a cabinet and you just can't see it. So what we're going to walk through is the different things that you can look for if you're not sure if there might be an underlying mold problem in your house. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see. Okay, and I'm going to go to present. Well, okay, can everybody see everything okay?
Perfect.
Okay, good. Okay, so what we're going to do today is just we're going to look at creating a healthier home and look at the early signs of mold detection and the steps to create a healthy home. Like I said earlier, health coach, mold consultant, realtor, and building biologist. And really, this whole process has led me to become really passionate about helping other people create a healthier house so that they can heal and thrive in. Because I know that all the work that you guys are doing, whether it's Dr. Ingram or a different physician, if your home isn't healthy, it's going to be a continued uphill battle to get better. And the goal is to heal and to be your best and to feel your best. So this is why really I became a realtor who's more in tune to wanting to take care of the house than someone who's just buying buying their house. So let's see. These are the topics that we will cover today: how to spot hidden mold, different testing methods that you can use, how clean is clean enough? I know that's a really, really big question. It's definitely a nuanced answer. A lot of times it is going to depend upon the sensitivity of the person, or I should say, whoever is the most sensitive in the house. That's how deep of a clean it should be. It really should depend upon whoever is the most sensitive in the house. We'll go over a couple different cleaning methods, and then of course what is good to keep, toss, or maybe save for later to once you're feeling better and you can maybe handle it a little bit more. Okay, so these are going to be the 6 clues of hidden mold. Like I said earlier, it's not always obvious. Knowing the signs or the clues is going to help you find out if you've got a mold issue sooner rather than later. Really, I wish that I had this knowledge before we had a problem. It took for my family, for my son to have neurological tics in order for us to realize that there was truly a problem. But if you have these subtle little things that we can look for throughout our house, we can hopefully avoid a major health issue down the road if we catch it early enough. As a matter of fact, I have a really quick story that I like to share with you guys about a client that I've worked with. Actually, I originally worked with her back about a year ago. She was one of Dr. Ingram's clients or patients because she had mold in her apartment. And I helped her over this summer to buy a new house. And what we ran into is that we were looking at a lot of resale houses. They weren't new homes, but they were.
On you over here.
I'm sorry?
Oh. What?
So we were looking at some resale homes this summer, and I was really making sure that we were looking for houses that didn't have any mold issues because she was on her healing journey. The inspector that inspected her house did find that there were 2 leaky windows. So we requested a mold test. A mold test. And then when the guy who conducted the mold test, when he went out, what he actually did was just a general air quality test in the center of the room, which checked out fine with what was going on outside. But the problem is that we already knew that she had those 2 leaky windows in that house. And so what I did was I had the mold testing guy go back outside to the house and double check and do a new test by both of those leaking windows. And when that came back, it specifically showed that those 2 windows did have elevated levels of aspergillus, which you may or may not know is a known toxic mold. Now, those molds didn't come up in the regular general air test, but they did come up when we tested those windows specifically. And so I bring that up is when someone is doing a test, or specifically in this case, where she was trying to buy a new house, if there was somebody helping her that was not aware of mold, they would have said, oh, your air quality test is fine, and she would move in, and maybe just fix the leaky windows, but not address the mold underneath, because if they had not tested those windows specifically for mold, there's no way that she would have known that there was mold growing underneath those leaky windows. So I was really glad that I was able to help her do that, to identify that there was in fact toxic mold underneath those leaky windows. And we ultimately had the seller pay for that remediation of those windows. So this is part of looking for the clues. So let's go ahead and go through what visibly you'll look for. These are, and sometimes it's not going to be quite as drastic as these photos, but it's definitely good to have the visual. When water absorbs into some materials like wood or particle board, it can bubble. So this first photo on the left side, typically, I mean, you can kind of see that one right there is of underneath like a sink, maybe like a bathroom or a kitchen sink. So you're going to want to look underneath all of your sinks and see if there's any sort of discoloration or paint bubbling or cracking. This middle one is also shows cracking and peeling. So when water absorbs into those materials, it can result in cracking or peeling. And then on the right-hand side, when water reacts with metal, it can turn into rust. Or if it's on concrete or brick, or sometimes you'll find on semi-porous items like leather, it can result in a white powdery substance, and that is actually the growth of mold. So another one here is separating. So if not just wood that could separate when the moisture is in there, also you could also find it with molding. So if you're looking at by your baseboards, those sometimes can separate if there's any moisture or water that has been absorbed in there. And then obviously staining, we've all have probably at some point seen staining on ceilings from roof leaks. Just because somebody paints over it or cleans it up doesn't mean that there isn't mold growing on the other side. So that's definitely something you want to be mindful of. And then, of course, musty odor and mildew. That's a big one because a lot of people don't think that mildew is synonymous with mold, but that actually is. That is really the first sign of the spores germinating, and that smell is what their gases are releasing into the air.
All right. Sometimes so last night I didn't put that on. Who's coming to?
Oh, I'm not.
So another thing that you're going to want to look for specifically is appliances. It's kind of not really a bonus in the good sense, but it's not part of the 6 that I included in there. But you're definitely going to want to look at any appliance that has a water source. So think about your ice maker and water dispenser that's in your refrigerator. Coffee maker, dishwashers are a big one. And then, of course, I definitely wanted to address washing machines. Front loaders, I have one. They're the worst. They're definitely the worst. If you are in the market to buy one, I would suggest a top loading one just because they're less likely to get mold in them. It doesn't mean that they can't, but they definitely are less likely. And the reason is that in a front loader, the way that gasket and rubber is in that front door, water and moisture and dirt can get stuck in there, and all that humidity and everything can create mold. So if you do have a front loader, you're going to want to make sure that every time you use it, to go ahead and just kind of wipe that down and leave the door open so that the moisture doesn't get locked in. You can for sure keep on it and avoid mold, but you just got to be diligent about keeping that clean and dry after using it. All right, so I was going to go over some mold testing. There are definitely different methods that you can use. There is not one superior method over the other. A really great idea is to have different types of testing. They all kind of have their own pros and cons, as long as you know what they're good for, and when in the process you're going to use them. They all can give you very, very good information. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and identify which those are, and then if you guys have any questions about each one at the end, I'd be happy to go over that with you guys. So this one right here is the agar plate. It's also known as a gravity plate or a petri dish. They're definitely the cheapest testing available. If you get them and include a lab with it, as you can see on the bottom, I do recommend Immunolytics. I'm not affiliated with anybody that I'm going to recommend here, but I do recommend them. I think it's like 30, theirs is maybe $36, I believe. That does include the lab report. They test for quite a few genotypes. It's 50. It will not test for any dead mold spores, which are still allergenic. It's only going to test for live ones. It may not show your source exactly, but these ones, if you just want a general idea, if there's something in the air, it's a good, affordable way to do that. These are also good, I believe, after you have cleaned and you want to see if maybe some of those larger porous items are contaminated or not, say like your upholstered furniture or a mattress, and you're not sure if you should get rid of it or not. This would be a good way to test that particular item and keep it, reasonably priced. Then we've got the air cassettes. These are generally an industry standard. All mold inspectors are definitely going to go out there and they're going to do these for whether they're doing a generic air quality test or a source specific one. The way that inspectors generally will use this, they'll have one outdoor sample, which is great because this is going to create your baseline for whatever your immediate environment, the normal ecology is outside of your house. Wherever you live may have different common molds and levels of them than, say, mine or Dr. Ingram's house or someone 2 streets over. So it's really important to get that baseline. And then what they generally do is they'll put another sample or air cassette, say like in the center of your living room or whichever room you might have a concern of. So the problem with that is that it's just going to be a general air quality test and not a source test. In the case, if you remember when I was letting you guys know with my home buyer client this summer, they did the general air test. They did the one outside and the one inside, and it came back fine. But then when I said, no, you need to go back and we need to test those windows because I know that there's a water leak in those 2 separate windows. So then they took an air cassette just like this, but they did it right next to where the window leak was. We banged around on the wall to disrupt the mold spores so it could capture into the air. Of course, we couldn't do any cavity searches because she didn't own the home at that time, so we can't cut into it. But that was able to detect the Aspergillus toxic mold that didn't come up in the general air test. So these can be really, really helpful, but you've got to know what your goal is and how to use it. So if you have a strategic plan and how you're going to use and capture the air, these can tell you a lot of really, really good, information. So in this one, it's not going to test for as many types of mold, but it will test both live and dead mold, which is important because dead mold is still allergenic mold. So like I said, inspectors will use this, but there is now a company that I found that does a DIY version of it. I think if I remember right, it's maybe $200 to $300 maybe to get the kit. I think it's $200 to get the kit, and they'll send you these samples with the instrument that you need to actually capture the air. And I've got their name at the bottom. It's called gotmold.com, which definitely is a really, really good source if you want to go ahead and do that yourself. So the next one is a swab or a tape lift. These are also very, very useful, and they can be helpful in air vents, HVAC units, in your windowsills, under carpet, things of that nature. They also test for about 30 different genotypes and also test for live and dead mold. You can, inspectors use this as well, but Immunolytics, the same place that you can get the agar plate, also provides a swab and tape test available. And I believe that they were up to $90 for the swab, including the lab. So this is another great option. And then, of course, there's the ERMI and the HERTSMI test. The main difference between these two is that the ERMI test is going to test for more mold species than the HERTSMI does. You can order these yourself. I've used Mycometrics a number of times. I've recommended them out to quite a few of my clients. And these are really good because it's going to show you the DNA of the mold type, which can be helpful maybe to back up with whatever your physician is finding if you're taking maybe the mycotoxin urine test as well. These are definitely more expensive. And you may, I would say the biggest con on this is that you might not be able to find exactly where the source is, but what it is doing is testing for all the mold spores that have settled in the dust in your house. So it could be, really it could be anywhere. You're not wiping the mold, you're using this to literally wipe the dust that's settled in your home. Okay, so mold inspectors are definitely a very important role in all of this. I would say that the biggest thing to remember, and we're not going to touch on remediation today because that is definitely a much deeper topic to dive into. But your remediation, which obviously is that your end goal is to have a successful remediation, but your remediation can only be as good as your inspection. So when you hire an inspector, you're definitely going to want to get a reputable one, because they're the ones that would be drawing up the protocol for your remediator. I never recommend having, because I know a lot of companies do this, they will be the inspector and be the remediator, and that's definitely not a wise choice. You should have two separate companies performing those, because it really is a conflict of interest if the remediator is following their own plan. You got to have someone to reinvestigate the remediation to make sure that it was done properly. A lot of times they will need different tests, but it's really just to get a more thorough investigation on what is going on in your home. So, and another thing that I will always recommend, and I do walk through this with people whenever they're getting ready to do an inspection, because a lot of times I might not know who the inspector is depending on where you're located. But the only person who really knows the most information about the history of your home is you. So any information that you have, no matter how small or large, in regards to whether it be a major water event to, it's really humid in here for, in the summer from, this hour to that hour, any information you have, we had my washer was leaking one day and we didn't catch it for 2 weeks, or any information you have to write it down for each room. Because like Dr. Ingram does a health history with you and your body, a mold inspector needs to essentially do a health history of the home for as far back as that you know. So obviously, if you've moved into a house, you may or may not know everything that happened to whoever owned it before, but any information that you have can be very, very helpful and instrumental in making sure that your remediation is successful. Okay, so here's a big question. How clean, how clean is clean enough? It's really not a one size fits all answer, and it's always going to depend on the person in the situation. Like I've said earlier, It has to be cleaned to meet the standard of the most sensitive person in the house. If you're the only person in the house, you only need to worry about you. But like in my case, of the 4 people living in my house, my son was the most sensitive because he was the one that gave us the red flag. He was the one that had the ticks. And so we needed to make sure that we were clean to meet the standard that was going to be okay for him and his body. The rest of us will fall in line because he was the one that was by far reacting the worst. So this is another one too. Is a single post remediation cleaning enough? I would say in most situations, probably not. And then a lot of times you want to make sure when the remediator is coming out that what their version of remediation is and what's actually required for the cleanup is the same. Because a lot of times they might just come, remove the mold, do a simple wipe down of that particular area only and call it a day. That's not going to cut it. Air travels. I'm sure you have maybe cooked something, in your kitchen, but you can smell it down the hall and in the living room and somewhere else. Air circulates throughout the house. So whenever mold is removed, the entire house should be cleaned and cleaned properly. So again, if you're sensitive to mold or allergens, a single post remediation is I wrote may not be enough, but it's definitely not going to be enough. Over time, though, repeated cleanings can help clear away any old contamination that's going to settle into the dust. So this is what we are going to look over here. The healthy cleaning of mold. Small particles and residual mold spores and fragments can persist even after normal cleaning methods. So if you think about when you're sweeping or mopping, those sometimes are not really helpful because essentially they're just spreading spores around and not actually removing them. Vacuum cleaners that are not HEPA tend to just spit out small particles like mold spores back into the air, and over time those particles are just going to recirculate and settle back down on your surfaces. But I do want to point out that a sterile environment is not the goal. Every home has its own normal levels of background level mold, and you're going to want to keep that in balance with whatever is going on outside in your immediate environment. Small amount of spores are going to find their way in, going to be tracked inside on your shoes and your jackets and just living life. It's going to happen. But the main thing is you want to make sure that your house level of humidity is kept in check to prevent those spores from growing and becoming problematic. Spores, they're not just, if your humidity levels are in check, they're not going to proliferate and cause a mold problem. It's the humidity in line with the spores lying around that's going to create the issue. Okay, so here are a few simple cleaning tips. But I did want to say real quick, because I don't think I mentioned it earlier in regards to the humidity. Normal humidity levels, if you can keep in your house somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 50%, is good. It's when it's above the 50%, exceeding 24 to 48 hours is when it can become problematic. So you want to definitely monitor that. So let's get over here to the simple cleaning tips. We're going to talk about banning the broom, your HEPA vacuum, vacuuming in all directions, why that's important. Talk about HEPA vacuuming prior to wet and dry cleaning. The importance of using disposable microfiber cloths, and then some common safe household products, the ones that work and the ones that don't. All right, so banning the broom, like I discussed earlier, mopping and sweeping just kind of spreads everything around. And you don't want to make the mold spores airborne again. Visible dust, that settles much, much faster, can settle within minutes, but mold spores are much smaller and lighter, and they're going to remain in the air longer before they settle. You can't clean spores and fragments floating in the air. They must be settled on the surface. So by banning the broom, more particles can be cleaned directly from the surface rather than redistributed throughout your living space. The goal is not to clean the air. You got to clean the spores once they've settled. So a HEPA vacuum, this is definitely the single most important tool that you probably are going to own in order to clean up mold spores and small particles. Regular vacuums, they allow mold to, or the mold spores rather, and any other allergenic particles to pass through their filters and spew back out into your living space. It's imperative to vacuum in multiple directions. Now, I know most of us, at least I used to, just vacuum front and back, and call it a day. But you're going to want to make sure that you're not going to miss any spores or underlying debris. So you're going to want to vacuum front and back, side to side, and diagonal. Almost, I don't want to say to exhaustion, but you're going to want to do it a lot. And then when the bag or the canister gets to be about 3/4 full, you're going to want to take that outside and empty it out. You're not going to want to empty it inside your house because by default, when you take it out and remove it, some dust particles will just be airborne again. So you empty it out outside, clean the canister or add a new bag depending on what type of vacuum you have, and then start again. So as far as hard surfaces are concerned, you would want to HEPA vacuum the dust prior to using a microfiber cloth, whether it's wet or dry. So the HEPA vacuum is going to remove any loose dust and dirt first, and then whatever is left over is going to be stuck due to static, grease, or any type of residue. And then you'll clean that up after. And so you have to realize that even beyond the kitchen, we'll say, because there's definitely lots of oils that will create a film on, the surfaces around your cooking space. But we as humans, like everything we touch, our skin is oily. So everything we touch has oils on it. On your clothes, everything. We shed skin cells all the time, and quite a few of them. So those oily deposits is not going to be reserved just for the kitchen area. It could be on other surfaces throughout your home just by the nature of us being alive and shedding and living in our house. So after you vacuum the hard surface, you would follow that up with a mild soap or detergent to cut through the film to remove any remaining spores. And we're going to touch on after in regards to the cleaning. The goal is not to kill any mold spores. You want to remove them because when the mold feels attacked by something that is supposed to kill it, it's going to react, and it's going to react by spewing out more and creating a further issue. So that's why we're not trying to kill it. We just want to remove it. Okay, so microfiber cloths are by far the best thing you can use when you're cleaning. Old towels or just any rags that you have around the house, those are not really going to collect like a microfiber cloth. You're really just going to smear around just like the mop or the broom would. Microfiber cloths have the ability to pick up and trap tiny particles. They can be used wet, they can be used dry. Disposable microfiber cloths are definitely a better choice than the reusable, just solely for the reason of trying to clean properly the reusable kind. So once you get over to just
The last invoice from Transit Level with Ron's name on it. It said, Ron, he wants his sheet.
So once you're finished with cleaning mold, like once we're beyond that point, if you want to use reusable just for the average dust in the house, that's fine. But for the purpose of cleaning up after mold, I would highly suggest getting on Amazon or Walmart or Target or wherever and ordering the disposable microfiber cloths. So the main way that you're going to want to use these is you're going to want to fold them into quarters. You're not going to want to continuously reuse the cloth over multiple surfaces. For a wet method, what you would do is you would dip the entire cloth into a soapy water. You would squeeze out as much water as possible so it's not dripping any longer. And then you would wipe that surface down with the soapy water. The cloth is, once you wipe down a certain area and it starts to pick up some of that grime and grease, then you will adjust and refold the cloth to an area that has not been used yet, and then clean some more. And then once your entire cloth has been used, all of the quarters, all the 4 quarters on both sides, then you can toss it in the trash and start with a new one. So I think we touched on this a tiny bit before, but trying to kill mold is going to backfire, because what it does is it triggers the mold's defenses, and it's just going to worsen the air quality in your house, because the mold is going to essentially try to save itself by spewing out more. It definitely is not the way to go. So this is why we're not going to use bleach. Do not use bleach to attempt to kill mold. I know a lot of people will say that, just spray some bleach on it, like on the grout in your bathroom. That's not the way to go. And then, not that these other ones down below are toxic like a bleach would be, but they're not going to be as effective. So I've got bleach on there as number 1. That's definitely a no-go. Definitely do not use bleach, because it's just going to aggravate the mold. Borax it's not soap, it's a booster. So it doesn't effectively break down any oils or fats or anything. Its primary purpose as a booster is to soften hard water, which would allow soap to work better. So while borax can be helpful, it's not to remove the mold. It's just really to soften up the water to allow the soap to work better. Okay, so alcohol, like rubbing alcohol or anything of that nature, it's a really good disinfectant for bacteria, but not at removing mold spores, fragments, or mycotoxins. Let's see, the next one down we've got is baking soda. Baking soda is generally good, but it's not going to cut grease, and so that's why it's not going to be a good option. It can help with eliminating any staining due to its acidity, but it's not good at removing mold spores. Hydrogen peroxide, that it can remove staining from if you have any mold staining in your tile grout, but it's not going to be able to remove any oily residues. And so that's why it's not going to be a good choice for removing mold spores and fragments. And then vinegar, that doesn't cut through grease. So therefore, not going to be a great way to remove mold. So some common safe household cleaners is really, it's just a small amount of soap or detergent in warm water. That is what's safe, because the soap or detergent is going to cut through fats, grease, and oils on top of surfaces. Over time, a lot of the surfaces in our house they end up with built up layers of just lipids. And you can see I forgot to put a space over there. I apologize for that. Lipids from cooking to our pets, and even our own body shedding skin cells that contain oils. So by adding a small amount of soap, this is going to make the oil soluble in water and allow for spores and allergens to be wiped away. Again, we're not trying to kill it. We want to wipe it away and trap it into those microfiber cloths. So repeated cleanings with this method over time is going to help to break down any accumulated film and any mold spores that may have settled in there. So I know Branch Basics is a good one. Dr. Bronner's is a good one. I'm sure there are a multitude of other ones that are good. If you have a healthy, clean soap option that you use that's something other than those two, those would probably be fine as well. Okay, so this is a big one. Keep, toss, or save. And I didn't get super specific only because we all have a variety of things, and a lot of it boils down to the way we already discussed how to clean. HEPA vacuuming first. So I've got things separated over here into 3 different basic categories because it's a very nuanced answer, and it really does depend on the most sensitive person in the house. Some people can do a once and done. They're good. Some people might need 3 or 4 times. If you are a sensitive person, it's a good reminder that you, while are probably the person that is that would be the most diligent and concerned of getting it done the right way, you're probably not the person that should be doing it. Somebody else should be doing it if you're a highly sensitive person. So there are obviously hard, non-porous items like your glass, ceramics, metals, plastics, and even finished wood. Soft, porous items like your linens, towels, and clothing, those are easier to clean. Of something that's also soft, porous, that would be more challenging. You're thinking about even thicker coats. Thicker wool sweaters might be more challenging. Any stuffed fabric, like pillows or stuffies, things of that nature, those are going to be harder to clean. I know what we did for stuffies. For the ones that were a favorite in our house, I literally took the stuffing out, washed the outer layer of the stuffed animal multiple times, and then restuffed it with new stuffing. And then lastly, the thick porous items like upholstered furniture and mattresses. Those, the hard ones, the hard porous stuff, generally, you can clean those super easy peasy. You got your vacuum, the HEPA vacuum, and then your wipe down, depending on how many times you want to do it, and you should be fine. The soft porous items, depending on the sensitivity, you may be able to get away with doing it a time or 2 and be okay. It might take a little bit more. And then in regard to like the upholstered furniture and the mattresses and pillows, those things you're going to want to test and see if they have any, if after you've finished vacuuming them, if there are any mold spores still on there. Those are not going to be able to be cleaned completely. So depending on your sensitivity, this is something, I mean, you sleep on your bed at least 6 hours, hopefully more. But majority of your time is with your face in the pillow and on the mattress. You're going to want to make sure it's clean. So if you have a clean mattress and pillows now, you can prevent it from becoming moldy. There's things that you can do. If it already is contaminated, that may be worth replacing for sure. But if you have a layer between you and the mattress, if there is a protective covering, that can help put like a slight barrier between the spores in there. But I would say mattress is definitely one is worth replacing, mattresses and pillows. Pillows are definitely a bit easier to replace because it's not as costly as a mattress. But we sweat in our beds, shed dead skin cells in our beds. So those are definitely, if it doesn't have that protective covering on there, is most likely going to be contaminated. And I would probably use that agar plate that I was talking about earlier in one of the methods to test your bed to make sure. That would be the best way to test for your bed. And I think I might leave this open a little bit more for questions. And like I said, I have specifics for a lot of different types of items, but that in itself is way lengthy. and very detailed, and that might be more of a one-on-one type conversation. And lastly, I just wanted to thank you guys for coming here and chatting with me today. If you want to have a copy of the 5 clues to spot with images as a reminder, a visual reminder of what you can look for, I've got a QR code here, and that can go right over to your email. And that's the last slide. I'm going to leave this up for just a couple minutes, just in case anybody wants it. Or I could also send it to Dr. Ingram if you have it, since you're recorded. And that's it. I'm open for questions, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. That was awesome. Even I've been doing this for years and I learned lots. Yay. We can open up for questions. I can see the chat, or Shannon, I know you're letting people take pictures. In just a minute, we can.
Yeah, just let me know, and I'll take it down so I can get back in the group.
Mary L. raised her hand. So Mary, why don't you go ahead and unmute and ask your question?
Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Mary.
Dr. Ingram and everyone else. Thank you. That was an excellent presentation. I have a question about, may sound silly, but what is the difference between mold and mildew?
Well, mildew is the early onset of it germinating. It's eventually would turn into mold. So that's kind of your first clue, because that's when the spores are germinating and colonizing. And so what they do is they send off this gaseous smell, essentially, is what we describe as mildew.
Okay.
Yeah, because usually you're going to find mildew in any high humidity areas, and mold. I mean, it can grow at different temperatures, but generally speaking, all you need is high elevation of humidity. I was going to say humility of humidity for anywhere from 24 to 48 hours consistently for it to turn into mold, for it to start to colonize. And so that is the smell that you will sometimes, sense, is the smell of the mildew germinating.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Hey, do you have another question, Mary? Go ahead.
I did have another question. Is how do you have any suggestions on finding a good mold inspector?
Yes, I do. I have some questions that we generally ask, and to make sure that they cover. I also recommend not. It really depends on where you're at, but going over the health history of your home with the inspector, they need to want to know more about your house. If they're just saying, "Yep, this is how much it costs. I'm going to come out and I'm just going to do this," 3 tests, because I've heard where a lot of people say, I charge XYZ dollars and we just do 3 or 4 tests or whatever their package is. That's not really the inspector for you. You want someone that's going to sit down and ask you some questions about your house. They're going to want to learn the history of your house. And you're going to want to make sure that they are not going to just do a air cassette outside and 1 or 2 inside and be done. If you have specific mold concerns in locations, when you do a walk, what I usually do when I speak with people is I teach them how to do a walkthrough of their house on what to look for, literally everything from your crawl space or basement all the way up to your attic, and in every room, in every corner. So you're essentially gathering the health history of your house. And sometimes you'll walk through and be like, "Oh man, I totally forgot that, this happened in the laundry room 2 years ago." And then it's just a reminder. And so you will write down on a piece of paper, each one for each room. I've got a log where I'll walk you through for each room what the event was and what you're looking for. So then you kind of know what types of tests and how many you ideally might need.
Okay.
Hey, Shannon, we've got another Facebook question. I'm going to let Mary answer that one, and then we've got a couple more here as well. Are you okay on time?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks.
Mary, can you ask?
Yes. Hey, Shannon, we have a Facebook question. You can hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you. Can I take my thing down? Is that okay? Or
Yeah. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right, let me unshare real quick so I can just see you guys.
Okay.
Let me go back here. Okay.
Okay. So the Facebook question is, what do you think about fogging with chloride dioxide following a remediation?
Okay, well, so the whole point of fogging is to bring the spores that are floating in the air down to the surface. So then you need to wipe with a microfiber cloth. So I know that some people are under the assumption just because we're, at some point we're all new, we don't know. And you hear all these terms and things to do. And I know I would, like in the very beginning stages of me learning all this stuff, I thought you're fogging and you're good, you're done. Like I literally had a remediator. I love to do air quotes sometimes. A remediator, like they said they were going to just essentially fog my house with some like EPA special spray. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I realized, no, that's not okay. That's not the whole point of the fogging is to settle the spores and then you go to clean them. Because if you don't wipe all of your surfaces at that point in your fogging, you're going to even take the Swiffer to the wall, wipe everything. They're just going to float back up in the air when they're dry.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then we have some people have their hands raised. No, it says Nomad, but it's Bryn. Bryn, you want to go first?
Yes, sorry about that. I wasn't sure how to change my little tag there. I realized it's got my my device name. So my question is in regards to the type of vacuum to use in your home, because you did specify HEPA.
Yep.
And I guess I've been using a Dyson for the last couple of years. And I'm curious if there's a specific recommendation that you make.
Well, as long as it has a HEPA filter is better than no HEPA filter. Definitely needs one. There are some that are recommended to be better than others. I would say that at least have a HEPA filter. Now, if you've got some change to spend, the Miele, and I can't remember exactly which model number off the top of my head, it's Miele, is supposed to be the like top-notch one. But some other more affordable versions are a Shark Navigator, which you can get for a couple $100, maybe like $200 to $300. Those ones, it's like the Lift Shark Navigator Lift is another good one. And that's going to be definitely more of an affordable than a higher end one that still gets the job done really well.
Okay, so just make sure that you have a HEPA filter or a
Yep.
vacuum that is HEPA filter compatible.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can't see. It seems like somebody else had their hand raised. If you just want to go ahead and unmute and jump in. Someone on the phone said, how do you clean your HVAC ducts? That's a great question.
Yes, that one is definitely, we might have to do a call on that one because it's definitely not as simple, a simple answer.
Not something you do yourself.
Yeah, definitely not something you do yourself. If you have, and then it also, it's going to depend on what is testing in your ducts. Do you know what I mean? Is it something worth attempting to clean or not? Like if you've got some pretty serious mold in there, you might just want to replace your ducts.
Well, and the question is, if you have mold in your ducts, why? Is there something with your HVAC unit or your plenum that's leaking that's gotten stuff in your HVAC?
Yeah, it could be a number of reasons. Like the fan could have mold in there. Also, like where it's located, if it's in a crawl space versus an attic. There's definitely things that can go wrong with it. So it's not just a one type of error that's going to cause it. You could just be pulling in from your house. But if there's a major issue going on, usually it's something at the base of where the unit is. And so the coils are another one. Your coils could be rusted and causing the issue. But I feel like the HVAC is more of its own conversation for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question that Mary has another Facebook question. One is when you mentioned washing the stuffed animals and the clothes, do you have a certain detergent that you use, or can any detergent be used when cleaning?
To be honest, so I do like EC3 laundry additive as a regular rinse. To be honest though, I would say that any clean detergent is good because most molds are water soluble. And so the detergent is going to loosen it up. And what you're going to want to do is do a double rinse because the mold spores are going to loosen up in the fabrics with the soap because that's going to get it out of there. And then the rinsing, it's going to wash down into the drain when it rinses. So I would suggest doing, if all you have is regular soap, it's okay. Do a double rinse, and you're going to want to do that a few times. Yeah, and then it depends on how thick your item is. So, like for example, with our stuffies, I took the big ones out. Just those were not going to be cleaned. Just took that stuffing out. The ones that were like I can't not have this one, and just wash those. And then as far as like clothes are concerned too, if it's a thinner material and it's not like a thick sweater, you're going to be okay with getting it out of there. The thicker the fabric, the tighter the weave, the harder it is going to be to disrupt it, and you may need to wash it a few times. But again, this also goes in line with the sensitivity of a person. So someone who's not quite as sensitive might be able to get away with 1 or 2 washings and be fine. Somebody who is more hypersensitive and has say a thicker sweater versus a t-shirt, they might not be able to wear that sweater for a while until they're completely healed.
Mary, you want to go?
Sure. So the other question was the follow-up question to the chloride dioxide is to help neutralize the mycotoxins into areas you cannot get. So she shared a product called Deodor Balm. And so the question is, how does that affect when you get it into areas that you can't clean?
Can you say that again for me?
That's okay. So the chloride dioxide, that's the reason why she wants to use it, is to help neutralize the mycotoxins into areas you cannot get to clean.
Okay, so would this be with the air duct? Is this the same?
I assume it's with the air duct and maybe between the walls or something like the air ducts and so she shared a product called Deodor Balm.
I'm not familiar with that particular product. I'm going to write it down because I might look it up later. Deodor Balm?
Yeah, I can text that to you.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that. I mean, you can neutralize is still not removing, but I know you're in a tough spot where if you can't get to it, you can't get to it until you're able to do like a full-on remediation. And depending on the situation, maybe that's not a possibility right now, which I 100% understand because we were there too. So neutralizing, I mean, she can neutralize if she likes, but until it's completely removed and unbothered. If it's not disturbed, that's also good because when you disturb it, it feels attacked. Same thing with like trying to kill it with a bleach or something along those lines. Even sometimes certain essential oils that it's supposed to kill will disrupt it because now it feels attacked, and it's the mold's purpose is to decompose and survive, right? So it's not actually trying to harm us, but it is. So
true. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's nothing further on. If she does, we will respond to her later.
Okay.
And one final, we kind of need to be in the home stretch here. One other person mentioned that they have a family member in Colorado, but it's in sheetrock. And I just want to point out there hidden mold. A lot of times mold is hidden behind sheetrock and we don't see it.
Right.
A lot of the newer houses, as Shannon will tell you, have mold built into them. It is the wood that's behind the sheetrock sits outside, gets mold on it. They put up the sheetrock, which is a nice food source. And then we keep our houses nice and warm, and then we get mold growing behind sheetrock. And you just got to take the sheetrock down.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it is very disheartening to see buildings going up with boards that are already moldy. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. Shannon, you got lots of claps and lots of applause in the chat too. So thank you so much for being here. And I am so glad that so many people on Facebook joined us. If you need us, look out for Family Functional Medicine, and then Shannon shared her her QR code as well. Have a wonderful day and stay well.
Thank you.